In August 1791, the richest French colony in the world began to burn. Not a palace, not a capital, a sugar colony. Saint-Domingue, the western part of Hispaniola, was France's Caribbean treasury. Its cane fields fed mills and boiling houses. Its ports loaded barrels for the Atlantic. Its ledgers turned land, ships, credit, and enslaved people into money. Then the people forced to keep that world alive rose against it. Picture the scene. Cane fields burned in the dark, storehouses collapsed into smoke. Roads that had carried sugar toward the ports became roads of revolt. Armed patrols lost control of the landscape they had used to police enslaved workers. The mill stopped. The boiling house stopped. The ledger became useless if the labor force refused the order behind it. That is the danger hidden inside this story. Sugar enters through fire, not through a kitchen. The question is not why people wanted sweetness. The question is how sweetness became valuable enough to build fortunes, violent enough to require armies, and fragile enough to help destroy the colony that made France rich. Before sugar became cheap, it was rare. Before it became ordinary, it was distance. Before it sat in a modern packet, it moved through hot fields, furnaces, ports, ships, tolls, and guarded warehouses. Sugar began as cane people could chew. The greater turn came when cane juice could be crushed, boiled, crystallized, stored, and moved. Ancient writers later described it as a reed that made honey without bees. The image mattered because it made sugar sound almost impossible, sweetness growing from grass. Think about that. Sweetness was no longer trapped inside a stalk. It could become cargo. That was the first secret of sugar. It was valuable because it was hard. It needed warm climates, skilled processing, fuel, water, labor, and transport. Every mile added cost. Every hand added value. Every port added a chance for profit. A merchant looking at sugar did not see only taste. He saw distance converted into price. A ruler saw taxable movement. A port official saw cargo to measure. A refiner saw a luxury that could be marked up before it reached an elite table. But rarity created a dangerous question. What if sugar did not have to stay rare? What if the crop could be produced again and again, closer to the Atlantic routes that carried European wealth? That question needed a new kind of place. Islands with heat, water, sea access, and enough land to connect cane field to ship. One of the first great experiments was Madeira. In the 15th century, Madeira became a prototype. Portuguese expansion brought cane, mills, merchants, capital, and the port of Funchal water channels ran through the island. Terraces held the crop. Workers cut cane and moved it toward mills before the juice spoiled. Here the pattern became visible. Imagine this: field, mill, boiling house, port, ship, ledger. That list sounds simple until you picture it. A cart dragging cane through mud, a water-powered mill crushing stalks, copper kettles boiling juice over heat, barrels waiting near a dock, a merchant writing numbers before the ship leaves. Sugar was becoming a repeatable operation. But this success created a darker problem. If Madeira could do it, why not do it bigger? The answer moved across the Atlantic. In Brazil, Portuguese colonists expanded the engenho, the sugar estate built around cane fields, crushing mills, boiling rooms, workshops, animals, fuel, and forced labor. Cane had to be cut quickly. Once cut, it had to be crushed before the juice spoiled. The juice had to be boiled, clarified, packed, shipped, insured, sold, and taxed. Picture the scene. A worker feeds cane into rollers. The stalk disappears. The juice runs out. The clock is always moving, because cut cane begins to rot. A hand caught in the mechanism could become a body pulled toward the mill. The crop punished delay, and the plantation punished the people forced to keep pace with it. Miss one link, and the profit began to rot. The estate could not behave like a quiet farm. It needed roads from field to mill. It needed carts, firewood, copper kettles, skilled boilers, overseers, guards, warehouses, credit before harvest, and buyers after harvest. It needed a calendar that forced weather, labor, and ocean shipping into one sequence. That solved one problem and created another. Sugar could be scaled, but scaling it required discipline at every step. It demanded timing, it demanded capital, it demanded bodies. A plantation was not just a field, It was a factory before the modern factory, and it only worked if human beings were forced into the rhythm of Cain. And that is where the story turns violent. European powers copied the formula. Barbados shifted toward sugar. Jamaica became part of Britain's plantation world. French Saint-Domingue rose into the most profitable sugar colony in the Caribbean. Dutch merchants, British ships, French refiners, insurers, creditors, and colonial officials all found a place in the trade. Once the model worked, states protected it. Money moved before the crop, credit financed estates, ships carried barrels, ports handled exports, laws protected imperial trade. Taxes turned sweetness into revenue. Patrols defended the order that made production possible. Look at the Atlantic map and the change becomes visible. Small islands became more valuable than their size made believable. A place a rider could cross in a day could feed fortunes across an ocean. Ports became counting houses. European cities gained refineries and merchant wealth. Governments wrote trade rules to keep profit inside their own networks. A plantation in the Caribbean needed credit from Europe. A refinery in France or Britain needed colonial barrels. A ship owner needed returned cargo. A government needed customs revenue. One crop pulled distant places into the same financial weather. But polite ledgers hid the center of the trade. Saint-Domingue made that center impossible to ignore. By the late 18th century, the colony produced a huge share of the sugar and coffee consumed in Europe. One small territory fed markets across the ocean and sent wealth into French commerce. Merchants depended on it. Ship owners depended on it. Refiners depended on it. Creditors depended on it. Officials depended on it. The colony looked rich from across the Atlantic. On the ground, it looked armed. Think about that. Guards, patrols, whips, mills, boiling houses, ledgers, ships waiting at port. The product became sweeter. The cost moved somewhere else. It moved onto the backs of enslaved workers cutting sharp cane under heat. It moved into mills where rollers could crush hands and arms. It moved into boiling houses filled with fire, steam, and long hours. It moved into punishments used to keep people working at the speed of spoilage. The violence was not an accident beside the plantation. It was what kept the barrels moving. The plantation did not only take labor, it took time, family, movement, sleep, and the right to refuse. The cane field demanded bodies in one rhythm. The mill demanded them in another. The boiling house demanded them again through heat and danger. That is what made sugar's beauty so dark. The whiter and cleaner the final crystal appeared, the more brutally the work behind it had been controlled. European consumers saw sweetness. The plantation saw schedules, wounds, quotas, and fear. But the colony had one weakness. The entire Atlantic trade depended on people who had every reason to resist it. In 1791, that weakness became visible. The revolt in Saint-Domingue did not simply destroy property. It attacked the route itself. Cane fields burned. Mills stopped. Boiling houses stopped. Roads reversed direction. Fear moved from the cane fields back toward planters, ports, merchants, and the French state. This was not a small disturbance inside a colony. It threatened an Atlantic order. The French Revolution had spoken the language of liberty, but Saint-Domingue exposed the contradiction at the center of French wealth. Could a republic speak of rights while its richest colony depended on slavery? Could French officials defend freedom in Europe and plantation violence in the Caribbean? The sugar colony forced the question. The answer became war. In 1794, France abolished slavery in its colonies. Toussaint Louverture rose as a central military and political figure in Saint-Domingue. Then Napoleon tried to restore control. French forces returned. Toussaint was captured and deported. War continued. Disease, resistance, and military failure broke the French attempt to recover the colony. In 1804, Haiti declared independence. France lost the sugar colony that had helped make it rich. The empire thought it controlled the commodity. It was wrong. But the old violence did not disappear. It changed form. If cane sugar depended on colonies, ships, enslaved labor, and vulnerable Atlantic routes, then war could break supply. Napoleon's Europe faced blockade and pressure. Suddenly, sugar was not only a colonial luxury, it was a strategic problem. The answer was beet sugar. Scientists had shown that sugar could be extracted from beets. Industrialists and states pushed the idea further. Beet sugar did not instantly replace cane. It did not erase the plantation world overnight, but it changed the geography of sweetness. Sugar could now be tied to European agriculture, factories, chemistry, and state policy. The factory replaced some of the old distance. Railways and steamships moved bulk cargo. Refineries expanded. Governments encouraged production, markets grew. Sugar entered tea, coffee, jams, sweets, bread, and processed food. In industrial Britain, sweetness became part of the working day. A cup of tea with sugar could move through a factory floor faster than a proper meal. Jam and sweetened tea gave cheap calories to people working long shifts for low wages. Sugar did not only sweeten life, it helped fuel the daily rhythm of industrial labor. The commodity became cheaper, the history became harder to see. That is the final disguise. The modern sugar packet does not show the burning cane field, it does not show the Madeira mill, the Brazilian Engenho, the Barbados estate, the Saint-Domingue ledger, the slave ship, the French refinery, the Napoleonic blockade, the beet factory, or the factory worker stirring sweetness into tea. It shows something clean, small, ordinary. But ordinary does not mean innocent. It means the route has become efficient enough to disappear. Today, sugar sits in kitchens, cafes, supermarkets, factories, and processed food. It feels personal, domestic, almost weightless. You tear open a packet, pour it into coffee, and the past is nowhere on the label. Imagine this, but behind that packet is land, labor, ships, taxes, credit, slavery, revolt, war, chemistry factory work, and mass consumption. Sugar helped build Atlantic fortunes, it helped finance imperial trade, it exposed the violence inside plantation slavery. It turned a Caribbean revolt into a world historical rupture. Then it reinvented itself as an industrial commodity so common that the old route became difficult to see. That is why sugar belongs in the history of power, not the history of taste. It was never just sweetness. It was a reason for ships to cross oceans, for states to write laws, for creditors to finance plantations, for workers to be forced into fields, and for rebels to burn the order that trapped them. Today, sugar looks ordinary, but behind it is a hidden root of empire, labor, war, finance, and power. Sugar was never just sugar, it was power. Thank you for watching until the end. If you want more stories about the objects, systems, and hidden forces that built the modern world, subscribe to the channel. The next story is already waiting. See you in the next video.